Thank you. It's so nice to be in conversation about this book. And I think we were just talking a bit before, one of the things that's happened to me since reading it is that I've been walking around in this kind of oceanic headspace where I feel like everything's about to flood, and I keep thinking, what's going to happen in that scenario? And I think, to me, the book is so convincing in the way that it plots out the kind of multiple scenarios that happen in the event of this disastrous flooding, which the book suggests is the AMOC. Maybe we could go into that, the collapse of the AMOC. But also just the very, very myriad ways in which it examines people's reactions to this event and non-human reactions to this event, and how there are so many different kinds of narratives within the book that relate to this process of meaning making, to something that is in some ways beyond narrative, because it's such a huge event. And there's so much in the book, and it's so rich and full of detail. One of the things I wondered, maybe to lead into this, is how you came to writing about the sea, and also maybe some of your processes of research.
Well, thanks everybody for being here, and thank you very much, Lucy, for speaking with me. So I first wrote another book about a new river appearing in a fictive Latin American country. So this is a real phenomena in certain places in the world. When the earth is very dry, new rivers begin to appear. And I thought that this was a really nice example of nature speaking back at us, because I think that this is one of the nice things about the climate crisis that we're experiencing. And this book was a magical realist murder mystery. So lots of humans die, and nobody knows if it's the river or another. I will not say anything about it. It's not been translated into English. Anyway, this book, the Dutch people didn't really get it. So it got some reviews, and some people liked it, but there wasn't discussion about it. And for me, it was quite obvious that this was like, a metaphor for the whole situation that we were in. And there was a discussion that I wanted to have. And I was thinking about this in the months after the book came out. And then at a certain point, I was like, okay, I'm going to write a book that you are going to understand. I'm going to flood the whole country. And this became this book. So what happens is that the sea floods the country 1 kilometer a day. And for me, this was a very easy book to write. All books are easy for me to write, but this one was particularly easy because of this tempo. You know, you can just write 1 kilometer each day, and I had the map of the country, and I was just sort of looking, because the sea comes from the west, and I was just looking at the map and seeing what would happen. Our politicians are based in The Hague, and The Hague is located quite close to the sea. So while in the beginning, they try to ignore that something's happening, very similar to what they are actually doing. They soon need to move because, yes, the city is flooding. And the same, what you described, this idea of seeing it in front of you when you go out on the street. I also had that after I finished the book, and when I was speaking about it with different humans, because there's so much that will be lost. And in the Netherlands, it's actually a discussion that we should be having a lot more, because the shape of the country is going to change, not just because of rising sea levels, but also because rivers are more prone to flooding, and there's also more drought. So the whole water, we're a very watery country. We're under sea level for a large part of the country. So the whole country's the shape is going to change in the next decades, and we're not really speaking about that. So I was hoping that the book would contribute to that, and it has. So
I was actually speaking to a friend today who lives in the Netherlands, and they said that they'd been delivered a kind of warning leaflet about flooding, and on one side it had like a flood, and on the other side it had a tank, like that everybody in the country has been sent these. And I was like, this is so different to the UK, where we have discourse about flooding, but there is not this sense of this could be a national emergency in the way that is realised in this book. And that discourse should be more in this country, you know. I wonder, just going back a bit to some of the kind of like research that informed this, there's kind of references to several historic floods, but also to, and I didn't know if this was a fictional device or not, this kind of dam made of light plastic that is used to keep back the sea, and in the end isn't strong enough. And I'm just wondering, like, how did you learn about all these different kind of facets to water management and, you know, like the infrastructure and all the kind of like I guess science of this?
Well, I mean, so I sort of took it as it came, you know. So I was looking, okay, today we're losing this and that, and what would happen? What would people probably do? I invented some things. The light plastic I invented. So if anybody wants to create dikes in this manner, contact me. We can speak about it. But I think that. I'm quite interested in the different narratives that are taking place in the book. So there's the political narrative, the political discourse. There's the scientific discourse. There's the poetic discourse. There's the activist discourse, and I'm moving in different parts of my life that are sort of connected in me. I'm moving in these different areas, you know. So I'm always interested in in climate science, and I try to keep up with the literature also for my philosophical work a bit, and I'm interested in our political and democratic debate. And I wrote this book a couple of years after the COVID pandemic broke out. And the Dutch people they were very slow. The government was very slow to respond, but when they did respond, it was by giving press conferences. And the language use of our prime minister at the time, Mark Rutte, was very interesting, because he managed to say a lot without saying a lot. And he was generally very good. He's now head of the NATO. But this was, I just became very interested in how language works in these different kind of narratives, and how that relates to how we act when something happens. And these different spheres, I suppose, ask for their own kind of research to sort of answer your question.
I was really struck by the way that the spectacle of the event is constantly managed and mediated through the kind of TV anchor and the Prime Minister and these political figures, where it seems that they're not so much concerned about the actual implications of it, but it's a constant question of how to stage this as a narrative. And even Ari, who is the climate activist, is making videos and thinking about how she's going to do this to get her message across. And I wondered if having all of these different kind of questions of how to represent this disaster in the book also related to a wider question of how do we narrativize? You know, because you do have to narrativize in some way these things. And I felt like there were so many different kind of like multiple circlings around this. But yeah, I don't know if you had any thoughts on like I guess, the relation of narrative and representation to these kind of like climate disasters? Or...
Yeah, I think that one of the problems that we are experiencing now in our societies is that it's a very the question is much too big for us. You know, it's very much about, oh, everything is going wrong and there are these huge disasters, and as an individual you can't really do anything. So instead of moving from the world is disappearing, we should instead of saying the world is disappearing, we should move to the life worlds that we are part of and that we can do something about and act in. And I think that in this book, you can very clearly see that the narrative that the politicians shape is instrumental. But it's also because of the pace, you know, it's 1 kilometer a day. So they need to sort of try to figure out what to do in real time. And the scientific discourse is a lot more sincere. But it's sort of moving behind the fact, you know, it's not really reaching the humans that it should reach, but it's also not able to get to intervene into what's really happening. And for me personally, so one of the characters is called Wilg in Dutch, and they're a 14-year-old person who writes poems, short poems about the sea. And I think that for all the discourses, this is probably my favorite in this book, because it shows that we are all part of we are part of the same world as the sea, and we are and there's a sort of comfort in that understanding, and also I think the beginning of another attitude as humans that is not the destructive one that we have now. Because apart from Willow and also Ari, most of the humans still want to focus mostly on rescuing humans and keep intact the binary between humans and non-humans.
One of the things, there's so many like kind of funny bits in the book, and one of the things I found really funny was that academics kind of tried to make these models far too late, and then all disappearing to a holiday theme park paid for by the university and just kind of retreating, and having this very like insular discourse. Just a slight veer there, but I think the role of the non-human is so important in the book.
Yeah, so this now sounds until now as if it's a book about humans, but it's really not a book about humans. I mean, humans have a role in it, but all the non-humans also have a role in it. So we don't just see the humans move to the German border, we also follow the pigeons and the toads and the horses and the foxes and the mice and all the others who and the fishes, of course, because for some fishes it's really a good event. The herrings, there used to be 5 populations of herrings in the North Sea. Now there are 4, but this event creates space for the jellyfish are also winning. Some of the fishes in aquaria, saltwater aquaria, are also having a very good time.
Yeah, I like the sense of this new kind of ecology blooming in the kind of sunken apartment blocks and parks. I actually wonder if you wanted to read a bit.
Yes, I will. We already spoke about this, so I know what I'm going to read. And you will also know very soon. It feels innocuous. It feels like a disaster movie. It feels like something gentle. It feels like a dream, it feels like a gift, it feels like a curse. The sea edged its way gently, very slowly into the capital city, a watery carpet at most a centimeter deep, a city deserted by all but the frail and infirm, oddballs, aging mice, a city that had stood for so long, had defied the sea for so long. A disaster movie that centimeters seeped under front doors and encircled furniture would buoy it aloft later that day. A student of anthropology rescued her older neighbor, threw her over her shoulder the way she'd seen heroes do in movies, and carried her to safety, went back to look for others, and fire engines patrolled the streets, still just about passable, as did the police, the army, the animal ambulance, 10 centimeters of water. They extricated humans, cats, parrots in cages, lapdogs and reptiles from upstairs flats. Someone had a Shetland pony in their shed. 111 was constantly in demand, but it wasn't yet chaos. It didn't feel like chaos. It was all in slow motion. The security team manager at the Rijksmuseum had locked the doors, and all the precious pieces had been taken away. But the beautiful floor, the beautiful heavy doors, the stained glass, the new toilets, dreamed up by a well-known designer and beautiful too in their own way, also painstakingly executed, and now covered with a shallow layer of salt water that would soon begin to flow, with waves more than a meter high that would soon worm its way into every nook and cranny, streaming through a tiny crack into all the lockers, one of which still contained a bag left behind long ago. There was only an umbrella inside, yet the woman who'd forgotten it still occasionally thought about that umbrella and wondered where it was, even during these last few days when there was so much else going on. It can be a mystery why our minds dwell on such small things. It feels like a dream. It feels like a disaster movie. Whether the sea dreams, nobody knows, not even the sea. Octopuses dream, and arguably mussels. The canals filled up and began to overflow. The salt water turned the freshwater brackish. Abandoned houseboats drifted eastward. Herring, mackerel, haddock, flatfish, sole and cod swam through the tunnels of the north-south metro line. Later they would be joined by rays. An old cinematographer filmed the water from his top-floor flat on one of the canals, a work that would later tour the world, though he wasn't around to see that. The emergency services made one final pass through the city. It was becoming more and more difficult to navigate around lampposts and bus shelters. Gangs cleared out the shops, didn't even bother with balaclavas. The police had better things to do. Ring-necked parakeets flew east in a riotous flock. A 9-year-old boy who'd been left behind let off fireworks from his balcony in the hope that someone would find him. A drunk man of no fixed abode was carried off to the next world by the water. All the electric bikes sank, most of the other ones too. All those old houses, all those statues, all those bridges, all those alleyways, all those bin bags, planters, cars, schools, benches, the Concertgebouw, the Vondelpark, libraries, cinemas, the abandoned hospitals, petting farms, police stations, theaters, restaurants, pet shops, student accommodation complexes, boundary walls, stations, the Hortus Botanical Gardens, Artis Zoo, the Rai Convention Center, street corners that had seen first kisses and heart attacks, windows through which life had been observed, sometimes for centuries, markets. Big Willem's herring stall was briefly buoyed aloft by the water and sank. It feels like a disaster movie. It feels like a dream. Perhaps this is someone's dream or everyone's dream. Perhaps all life is ultimately a dream and no one ever comes to realize.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think with the list of things disappearing, and actually there's a recurring motif throughout the book of like short advertisements for things. there's also a sense
ending with body bags.
ending with body bags, yeah. So it starts off with general food and gets more morbid. But there's throughout the book there is this constant listing of things that almost in their listing, their moment of disappearance become visible, and I found that really interesting. This sense of when something's being taken away, it is then that you start to like account and document for it, and
yeah, so the narrator in the book sort of zooms in and zooms out. So sometimes we get like a full view from above, and then sometimes we really go into the lives of certain characters, but also everything that's being lost at a certain point.
And also that, and I guess this goes back to what you're saying about the some things are okay, you know, for the fish, and that there is like a lack of like full apocalypticism in the book that I appreciated, that it wasn't like everything is smouldering ruins and everything ever is dead. It's like actually people do find ways to survive,
and other animals too.
And other animals,
and,
yeah.
It's sort of unsure if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
yeah, and it was a lot more subtle and interesting for it, I thought. And just this this sense that also that this is a wealthy industrial country in the imperial core, right? And there's a lot about, you know, the Dutch will be taken on by the Germans and other countries because they are wealthy or, you know, colonialists, while like migrant and refugee people and, you know, like minoritized communities will be left to drown. And, you know, exploring the politics of that also seemed really important to the book, that what would happen if this was not a wealthy industrial imperial core country.
Yeah, that's it. And also even in how the different humans fare, because some of them, I mean, a lot of them are rescued and then are taken to Germany and to sports halls, and they begin a new life. But then there are also some refugees that can't really enter that system. There are also elderly people. There are constantly these judgments that the politicians make, and the rescue workers, and everyone. And in the second part of the book, 3 of the characters, Ari, that we spoke about before, Willow, the poet, and Steen, an oceanographer, go back. They all want to rescue someone. They all have something to do in the drowned country. And when they come to Amsterdam, they find a community of humans living on the roofs there, also together with birds and some others. These are the refugees, but also the anarchists, and also some people who felt very strongly about staying. But there's also another category, and that's sort of the rich disaster tourists who are having a party on the roof of the Amsterdam building near the central station, and were there with their crews, and then are so there's, I think, all the time also in the book the strong sense that these stories play out differently for everyone. But yes, the Dutch are very feel very sure that they will be welcomed in other pieces of Europe, so in Germany mostly, but also, for example, in France, because there are a lot of places where the economy can use a boost. So these kinds of things.
I thought it was good having there was like a group of right-wing conspiracists throughout as well, who think it's all like a kind of conspiratorial plot, and also provide another kind of like political perspective for them.
Yeah, so they're called the blijvers. So in English, this is the remainers, and they are in the beginning quite sure that the sea is actually not moving at all. And there's one person, Big Willem, who was also in this piece that I just read, and he's selling fish at the Albert Kuip market, and he's sort of vlogging about the whole situation. And even as the water comes, they keep denying that the water comes. But then at a certain point, they need to leave because it's impossible to remain. But they go to Belgium mostly. I don't know why. Things go wrong with them, yeah.
I was reading some of your academic writing on multi-species injustice and connection. And I'm super interested in how, because you've got such a kind of a deep knowledge of things in the environment, humanities, and lots of kind of, especially focusing on animals and non-humans, how you see the relation of your academic research to creative practice. And particularly, I was thinking about this framework of multi-species injustice, which you will be able to explain much better than me, but paying attention to the ways in which we relate to non-humans, not only on a personal level, but within like wider political structures. Perhaps that's also a wrong summary.
Yeah, so the academic work actually began as a kind of hobby, because I was initially trained as an artist and writing and working as a musician for a long time, and then I wanted to study philosophy. I'd been wanting to do that, so at a certain point I thought, oh, yeah, let's just do it. And it turned out that in philosophy there wasn't a lot of attention for non-human animals, and especially not for non-human animals and language. And because I'm so interested in language, and it's quite obvious to me that non-human animals speak, I began writing about that and doing research. And when you read about the languages of non-human animals, but also how they are treated in our societies, you immediately find out that this is a deeply political question, that our societies silence them and do not take them seriously in many ways for economic reasons, reasons of power. And I think I've always, so some of the novels that I wrote, Bird Cottage, which has been translated into English, is a novel about Len Howard, who lives with birds. And this is very closely related to some of the animal work, animal philosophy work that I've been doing. The novel I wrote before that is about an animal activist who places bomb parcels in butcher shops, and that's also quite clearly connected to the academic work. I think that in novels you can show, in philosophy you try to build clear arguments and you respond to the literature, and you are working in a quite specific framework in which you are in dialogue with other philosophers. While in novels there's much more space to write about the ambiguity of life, and also to speak more about this emotional truth of, for example, how we treat animals. But I've also written novels about other things, and so the work kind of moves in different directions, and I let it move in the direction that it wants to move in as much as possible. But I do think that I've indoctrinated myself with the animal philosophy work, because I think that once you begin paying attention to the other beings with whom we share this planet, you can't go back to your human perspective. And maybe I did this work because I already wasn't in the human perspective, but I think that it's very actually taking other beings seriously, non-human animals, plants, others, it changes everything. And this is also why this novel is not specifically about humans, while it is also very much about humans.
One of the things I really loved in the novel was that the way that the non-humans have these different forms of knowing, that even though they don't have like satellites and phones and stuff, they can still have these other ways of perceiving, knowing that things are happening, and this kind of like instinctual knowledge. And I was really interested to think about this in terms of emotional effect, and how animals experience emotions, but also perhaps in relation to some of your other writing on depression, which you've also written extensively about. I'm thinking here of the bit where the Steen, the academic researcher, drowns in seaweed, and she becomes kind of like integrated into this seaweed. And although it's very sad, it's also like a moment of kind of freedom. I wondered if there was a tension in the book at times where, because I guess normality had collapsed and sort of time and space and memory for people during this apocalyptic event, made less apocalyptic in the novel, there was a sense of like what it meant to die had changed, or that people just died suddenly. I don't know, but and then there was also, going back to the non-humans, you know, lots of non-human deaths, and particularly like domesticated animals in comparison to wild animals. So it's a bit rambling, but hopefully you know.
Yeah, I think that, so I have two responses. The first one connects to what I was saying before. So I think that we find human death a lot more important than the death of other animals. And one thing that happens in this book is that death really is part of the story, and it sort of it doesn't see these things as separate. It's all sort of on the same level. But it's also, when I was writing this book, my father died, and he had been ill with cancer. Actually, since the beginning of when I began writing this, I did tell him about the book, also that it's a very funny book, because he liked funny books. But I think that for me, in a sense, of course, it's a book about the sea. It's not just a climate book. It's also a book about the relationship between the Dutch people and the sea. You know, it's an older story. It's a story that's really part of the Dutch soul, I think. But it's also a book about death, and a book about what to do when something disastrous happens, or when something ends, and how things continue. And maybe they don't continue in the way you had imagined they would. And maybe new things happen that you couldn't imagine. So it's, I think, it's for me very much a book about death, but not in a I'm tempted to say not in a sad way, but what I mean is really the understanding that death is always present with us in life. You know, that there's not really a dichotomy between death and life. And I also lived with laboratory mice. I've adopted 3 groups of mice, and I learned a lot from them. I also wrote a book about them, which will be translated into English. And no, I'm not sure when. I'm just answering all the questions people have been asking me immediately. But the mice, because they only live for 2 years or 2.5 years, taught me a lot about life and care, because they're very caring beings, and they also care for their dead companions. They bury them, and they have all kinds of rituals and social encounters with each other and with me. But the 25 mice who died also taught me a lot about the ways in which death is with us, and also how to respond to that fact, because I think in our societies we tend to neglect that, and not we don't have a lot of, at least in the Netherlands and also here, I think we don't have a lot of rituals and ways of speaking that do justice to that presence.
talking about the blurred boundaries between life and death is one of my favourite subjects. But and kind of related to this.
Is there something that you want to say about that?
Well, I'm thinking about the voice that appears in the novel after Steen's death, and it seems that it could be linked to Steen, or it could be linked to the appearance of this kind of goddess of the sea, but also that it's a kind of haunting, like they're haunted and guided by this voice. And I wonder if that had a kind of relation to what you've just been saying with this.
Yeah, no, I think this just happened. So the thing is, when I write, I don't really think about what I'm writing. So I don't think, oh, we now need this or that in the story. It's more that I'm on the boat with the humans and also a dog. So they find a dog who looks a lot like my dog Ollie, who's also dead now, but he's also in the book a little bit, wagging his tail on the boat. But I felt that because Steen is such an important guiding person for the others, that she also needed to be there in that sense. But we don't know if it's her or her ghost, or everything becomes blurred at a certain point when the remaining humans are on the water. And
I liked a bit where I think Willow asks if they're in an afterlife. And I was also reading, have you seen Ponyo, the Japanese anime film? It's about a village that's flooded, a kind of giant flood. And then I was reading about Ponyo, and basically it said that the plot could be that the two central characters actually drowned, and the rest of the film is happening in this afterlife, and I was like, oh my god. But also I felt like that could be happening in this book, right? That it could be that they were actually in an afterlife, and I liked that ambiguity where it's like we're not actually entirely sure if they have survived, if we're in a dream, you know. It kind of stayed amorphous. Yeah I'm wondering, with the timing, we've got, it's 10 to 8. Would you like